Welcome to the Leader to Leader podcast. I'm your host, Susan Spears. Our guest today is Dr. David Sam. David, this is, I think, the third time I'm having you on to discuss things at the Leader to Leader podcast. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you for not forgetting me.
I love spending time with you, Dr. Sam. Let me tell our listeners just a little bit about you, and we're going to talk more about it because we're in for a treat today because we're just going to have a really good conversation. Dr. Sam is the former president of Germanna Community College. He was the president of the college for about 10 years, 2007 through 17, I think, is correct.
Correct.
Yay, I got that one right. I love it. And a lot happened in those years. Today, he's been retired from that formal role and many roles in education and the business community prior to that role. So he'll probably talk a little bit about pieces of those years as a high contributor in the workforce. But today, he's a happy poet and freelance writer, adjunct professor, editor, and mentor. And the role of mentor is one that keeps him really attached here at the Fredericksburg Regional Chamber. Dr. Sam has continued to be a mentor with our Leadership Fredericksburg program, committed to it even after retirement and saying, I'll do it as long as, it feels right and it works for both of us. And so now he's been a mentor for, the years. Has it been every year since 07 or 8 except 1 year,
we
right?
We missed 1 year. I think this is the 16th mentee I've had. Yeah.
Think about that. 16 years of different fellows coming through the Chamber's Leadership Fredericksburg program and having that grand opportunity during those 9 months to formally sit down at least once a month with Dr. Sam to work through their journey. So thank you for that commitment.
I think if anything, and I tell them this, I may get more out of it than they do.
Yeah, you always say that, and it's great. Well, thank you for coming back in. I'm just delighted to spend time with you today. Last night when I was getting ready for work today, a little notebook of mine from a few years back caught my attention. And this was a notebook. Listeners, do you guys ever hold on to something that maybe you should have, shredded or gotten rid of, or old notebooks and stuff? They just have a way of sticking around, right? And so this one is a notebook that I had in 2009 and 2010 that I carried around and took notes during different meetings and so forth at the Chamber of Commerce. And in February of 2009, Dr. Sam spoke with our Leadership Fredericksburg class, which he did many times, and we'll probably chat about that some more too. But I loved looking at this, just reading the notes that I took down from listening to you that day with our class. And a lot of it was around leadership and mentoring. And so it ties right into talking about some of those things today. Here's some of the things that you said. You were talking about a mentor that made such a huge difference for you early in your leadership journey. You felt and feel like your style as a leader is a servant leader. And you had a mentor, Dr. Foster, who I'll stop talking in a moment so we can hear more from you about it. But at the time you said you didn't see yourself as a leader, and he saw that in you. He found, recruited, mentored, coached other leaders and said that leadership is like love. The more you give it away, the more you receive. Good leaders are teachers, and good teachers are leaders. You were young, insecure, unsure about your journey, but he saw something in me and helped me find it. Mm-hmm. What does that bring to mind?
Yeah, there a group of people. I mentioned some during my inaugural speech after I was hired. There are a group of people who have made a huge difference in my life.
Yeah.
There's a second group of people that made a huge difference by being negative role models.
Oh, exactly.
And
sometimes we get stuck on those, don't we?
I learned an awful lot from them, too. But Milton, he had been a Army officer in World War II.
Okay.
And he was a professor of English at Eastern Michigan University. And at the time was serving as the department head, which was a more administrative role. And he taught one class a semester. And I happened to take his American literature class.
Wow.
And a semester later on, I was in another English class, and the professor, Ernie Gahn, gave me, David, Dr. Foster would like to see you in his office.
Oh.
And even though we're college students, some of the people went, ooh, like you're being called to the principal. I had no idea why Milton was calling me up there. But he said there's this position in student government where each department has a representative on the advisory council to the dean of the College of Arts and Sciences. And I'd like you to take that position. And I, basically thought, why me?
Yeah, it was a surprise, right?
Yeah. I had never seen myself as a leader. I'd never really seen myself as a follower. If anything, I saw myself as more of a loner.
Mm-hmm.
And, there's the Robert Burns Scottish poet, oh, what a gift to give us to see ourselves as others see us. Looking back, there were times in my life where I had shown leadership in high school or wherever, but I didn't see that. That wasn't part of who I thought I was. And I said, well, if you think I could do it, I'll be glad to. It was a challenging time because this was right during the demonstrations against how colleges were run, as well as against the Vietnam War and African Americans in colleges and so on. And all of a sudden, I'm right in the middle of that.
Wow.
But it was eye-opening. I remember saying about 20 years had passed, and I ran into a fellow student who had been with me in the English department and some of the things we did there, where faculty and students were working together to change things. And Bev said, what I remember about you was that you were the catalyst that could bring people together and get them to work towards a common goal. And I remember at that time, I'm older now, and I thought for a minute, and I said, yeah, I guess that's true. But he saw that, and I was blessed and lucky that when I got the job at Germanna and started in 2007, one of the first calls I made was to him out in Arizona.
Nice.
He was retired in his 80s, and get to thank him. I said, I don't know if I would be in this position if you hadn't done that. Maybe I would, maybe not, but certainly you were instrumental and critical in my leadership journey. And he said, well, thank you, David. I'd like to talk more, but we're rehearsing a musical.
I'm busy today.
In his 80s, he's rehearsing a musical. He made it to 100 years old.
Oh, my goodness.
I'm still in touch with his daughter.
Oh.
And we both remember him.
Yeah.
Of course, she, as a daughter, remembers much more. But
that's nice.
To be remembered like that would be something to aspire for.
Yes, yes. And what a great legacy. First of all, to have inspired you, to have seen in you some of the things that you were doing, bringing people together. You're busy doing and not realizing the impact of that doing, which is sometimes what life is, right?
Yeah, I think you experienced something similar when you first were shoved into the temporary role of president of the chamber.
Yeah, you're one of the folks around town that remembers that time. Yeah, 2010.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, we were chatting about it
We
for
were both,
a moment.
We were both new. I had never been president of a college before, and you had never been in charge of a chamber before.
Exactly. You go from, maybe having a thought of what is that ultimate decision-making position like. We both know our good friend Joe Wilson. I remember him, he was on the search committee, and one of the things he said to me is, "Kid, be careful what you wish for." I didn't do his voice well. "Kid, be careful what you wish for." And I was like, whoa, wait a minute, Joe. I'm not really wishing for anything. I'm holding the fort down here. But looking back on it, I know I can see so much more about what people like Joe meant, because, you carry a lot heavier weight when all the decision making is on you. But back in those early days, I don't know about you, David, they talk a lot about things like imposter syndrome today. I don't know that I ever thought about something like that, but I remember being really conscious about not wanting to screw up. So being very serious.
That's a good thing to.
Yeah. But what I mean by that, I know he's openly laughing at me. No, but being like, just like every day, it's like the image and everything about you is tied into that professional role, and really doing it justice, really owning it, until one day, a year or two or three in, you go, well, maybe I'll open the door a little bit more and share that sometimes I like to listen to the Rolling Stones, things like that you were kind of holding tight because someone might judge it.
Well, I think when you're new to a role, new to a place, especially, I mean, I came in from a different state. People don't know you.
Yeah.
But even you, your staff and others knew you to some extent, but they knew you in a different role. They didn't know you in this role as the CEO. Two things I think are going on. One is, you're managing yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And I think many of us have the feeling, the imposter syndrome, or some maybe version of that, because I remember when I became vice president at college in Florida, and that Monday in July when I sat in the desk and I said, what the heck did I get myself into?
Right.
Self-doubt is a mixed blessing.
Yeah.
If you don't have it, that's a problem.
Right.
Because then you're arrogant.
Mm-hmm.
If you have too much of it, that's a problem.
Yeah, sure.
So you're managing your own identity as you see yourself, in this new position.
Mm-hmm.
But you're also managing how other people see you as much as you can. And if you don't fit enough of what they expect, that can be a problem. So, I made sure to wear a suit and a tie because that was the uniform of the day. After I'd been there a while, we changed the dress code, and I could come in a polo shirt and slacks. I think you had mentioned in another conversation you wanted to dress a certain way, wear pearls.
Yes.
Power.
Yes.
That's the woman's power suit tie.
Yeah, a lot
Red
of suits.
Tie is the pearls. Because you wanted to say, I own this job. I own this role. I can do it. Mm-hmm. And people do judge both in depth and superficially.
Mm-hmm.
So you do have to be conscious of that, manage that role.
Mm-hmm. Well, one of the things that was helpful to me in that time, as I found myself in some new rooms, often with a lot of gentlemen, which is, I'm very comfortable in those rooms, but it really came in handy that I'd watched a lot of sports with my husband, and I could be standing there with a bunch of gents that I didn't know, maybe at a Virginia Chamber event or something like that. And if I was holding my mug that had the New England Patriots logo on it, it would just open a conversation. about NFL and stuff, because here in Virginia, they hate the Patriots. And so it would be great, because then you could have this dialogue that would just be the greatest icebreaker without even trying to have one. And so I really learned some of those pieces that were important that you don't necessarily talk about in leadership, those conversations in between. And we lost some of that in COVID because of how we all went away to home and everything. And the meetings were just, you pop on Zoom. And so all of that getting to know each other part, it's so great to be back in person. I kind of rambled on that.
There's some good things that came out of COVID. I mean, the use of technology opened doors to a lot of people who weren't able to get in person and so on. But, as the politicians would say, pressing the flesh and looking eye to eye with people, and that's really not replaceable.
I agree. All right, so we'll shift a little bit again. One of the things I wanted to...
Did I say anything really wonderful there? I wonder if I agree with myself.
Yeah, you went on to say... In February of 2009, organizations don't always talk about love, and that's an important thing to talk about.
Yeah, it's a 4-letter word.
You had LOVE in all caps, and having fundamental respect for people.
Yeah, so many leaders are really focused on strategic plans, big goals, and budgets, and they should be.
Yes.
But they don't really like people that much. They aren't necessarily disliking people, but it's not where they focus their attention. I remember when I was a frontline manager at a very large college of around 25,000 students. And I was one of 2 lower-level managers, part of a task force that included senior leadership. The chancellor and the campus presidents, and then a couple of us that were nobodies. And they were talking, I don't even remember what they were planning on doing, some kind of change plan. And Marty, woman, president of one of the campuses, said something, and some others said, we need to do this and that. And I said, well, this is how that might be perceived by the people who work here.
Right.
And Marty chuckled and looked at me and said, David, keep reminding us there's real people out there. And it was a joke, but it was a joke against herself, because she was one of those people who focused on the big picture, the goal, forgetting that there's hundreds of employees.
Yes, getting you there,
and they're all going to experience this somehow and be afraid or whatever, and you need to pay attention to them. So obviously I'm not talking about the kind of love that will land you in trouble with HR or the courts.
Yes, correct.
We're talking about Christian love or, Buddhist love or whatever you happen to believe in, that empathy for others, respect for others, caring for others, especially when you have to lay them off and things like that.
Right.
It shouldn't prevent you from making hard decisions, but it should force you to try to humanize that decision.
Right. Yeah, that's an important piece of it. And whenever you're working through change like that, all of those pieces of empathy, care, listening, and sharing the why. So those people in the room that put this strategy up on the wall and made the plans and are moving everyone towards those goals, they know the why. And so you were helping to remember that we have to have that buy-in. Now, they may not agree with the why, but if they understand the why, they at least know what they're moving towards.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember the organizational theorist, as I age, names become,
I know.
they're in my filing cabinet, but I just can't dig it out.
They're somewhere in there.
Yeah, but anyway, he was saying, he was asking a group of leaders about organizational change. What's the first thing the individual employee wants answered? Most of the time, the leader bringing the change thinks it's, why are we doing this?
Yes.
How are we going to do this? That's not what they want to know. The first thing they want to know is, what's it going to do to me?
How does it affect me? Mm-hmm.
If you can begin to answer that, then you can eventually get to why this is good for the organization. But if you don't answer that, they're not going to be hearing.
Right. You wonder when you're in a meeting how they didn't hear anything. Well, because their head's kind of ringing, stuck in that. Oh my God, am I being?
Is this going to make my job harder?
Yeah.
Easier? Am I going to have a job? Those kinds of
questions.
questions.
Sort of remembering, and I think remembering when you've been in those shoes, right? And what it felt like when you didn't know the answers.
wasn't born a president.
Right. Somebody maybe was. I don't know who. Was anybody? I don't think so.
Maybe John Quincy Adams.
Yeah, right. Yeah, there's a lot of steps in between. Well, tell me how it feels. Now we're a few years out, and you've settled on a real comfortable place in what you're doing with your life now as this great retired person, at least retired from that 9 to 5 or 9 to 9, crazy lifestyle of the full-time work and leadership. What's it like? How's it feel today, 2025?
It's worked well.
Yeah.
I remember when I was looking to retire, I heard from people who had retired, and it came down to, I guess I'll say 3 things you really need to pay attention to.
Okay.
The obvious one, are you financially ready, able to retire? Have you got all your 401ks and everything in those ducks in a row? You need to find something to do. You can't fish or golf every day. Maybe our friend Bruce Davis can golf every day. I don't know, but most people can't. You need something else that matters to you and others to do. Could be small, could be large, something. And have you got your head about your current role in a place where you realize you aren't that? So I wasn't president of Germanna. That was a role that I performed. An important role. And when I say performed, I mean that both in the theater sense, because as leader, you're on stage, you are performing, but also performed as in the sense of doing the job. But that's not who you are.
Yeah.
If you haven't got that done, then as a fellow president from another college told me after he retired and then sought another presidency, I failed retirement. If you haven't done those things, then you're probably going to fail retirement. I also got another important thing from one of my board members at the time who said, when you announce your retirement, everybody's going to want you to join all these charities and organizations.
Oh, right.
Wait a year before you say yes, because otherwise you're going to be like me, overcommitted.
So you did that.
I did that, yeah. And that's where I got involved in the Poetry Society of Virginia on the board, which I'm about to retire from that.
Well, you've done that. Well, tell us a little bit more about that and about how you really fell into this this role of just loving being a poet and what you've done with that.
Well, what I found, because, I had committed myself to being very serious about writing, mainly poetry. I've written other things too, some bad plays and things like that. But when I was 18 years old, I had started writing stuff, bad sci-fi, when I was like 11. And I started writing poetry when I was 15. But when I was 18, February 1968, shows you how old I am, is when I made a commitment to being serious about it. And I did that until early mid-90s, when I was working on a PhD, married Linda, suddenly had an instant family, new job as the dean of a college, and also kind of ran out of gas, and I stopped writing for about 10 years. And what I found was that, unlike what I just said about your role as a formal leader of an organization, who I was, among other things, a poet. And that was not something that I could retire from. And recently, a couple people, even my wife, had said, why'd you decide to write poetry? It's not like you're going to make money at that. Most people don't read it anymore. There was a time in our history where everybody read poetry or recited it or memorized it. Unfortunately, that's not true anymore. Why'd you decide to write that instead of, best-selling detective stories or something? Which doesn't mean you can't do both.
Sure.
And I said, I don't know, poetry kind of picked me. The being on the board of the Poetry Society is different. And the way I got involved in that is I went to the festival, and the then president knew that I had been president, I guess I was still president. I was about to retire of Germanna. And he knew most poets were not really good at organizing people. That wasn't what they focused on. And he needed people on the board who
had some other skills.
Had some skills about organizations.
What is the poetry, the festival? What is that like? Tell me about that.
Poetry Society of Virginia is a members organization of people who support poetry in Virginia.
Okay.
Many of them write, but there are people who just support it. They're readers. They love poetry. We promote poetry in schools. We have a youth poetry, older poets working with young poets.
Okay.
We have an annual contest each year beginning in January. Part of it is for youth poets, those in school, high school, college. And we promote events and activities around the state. Every spring, we have a gathering of members for the Poetry Festival, as well as our required organizational business meeting of members.
Is it in Richmond or?
Normally Williamsburg.
Williamsburg, great.
The Poetry Society of Virginia was founded by a group of poets in 1923 in Williamsburg. And the university there, College of William and Mary.
Just a little college.
So
beautiful, that
they're
campus.
Very supportive of the, we're going to be doing it at the College of William and Mary.
That's nice.
And, it's both an opportunity for us to get together, celebrate poetry, but we also have to have required IRS member meeting every year.
Oh, of course. So now there are different types of poetry, or, are there rules? Like, what's your favorite style of writing with that?
Well, I tend to write a free verse.
Okay.
But there's, from in high school or wherever you had your last poetry class, there's rhymed poetry, very formal poetry, where like sonnets or
Yeah.
iambic pentameter, blank verse. There's influenced by Asian styles. You know, haiku is one you may have written
Yes.
in college or high school. Imagistic poetry that's focused on image, nature poetry, dramatic poetry. Shakespeare wrote poetry in his plays, and although the peasants normally spoke prose.
Yeah, it as somebody who writes music, the lyrics are very, very akin to, poetry.
Yeah, lyrics are a different game.
Yeah.
I have not been successful at writing lyrics
Okay.
because the music for me is in the poetry.
Mm-hmm.
Whether you're writing,
Mm-hmm.
something that has its own rhythm, I caught this morning's minion, dapple dawn, drawn falcon. There's a music there. It's a Gerard Manley Hopkins. In writing songs, because I have friends who are musicians, and
Right.
I had owned a music store
Uh-huh.
for a number of years back in the 70s, early 80s. The song lyric and the voice is one instrument that works with other instruments, whether in an orchestra or a rock band or whatever. And there are some songwriters whose songs are approaching poetry. I mean, after all, Bob Dylan won the Nobel Prize for Poetry and Literature.
Had a feeling Bob was about to come up.
Paul Simon's lyrics.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
And there's some writing now but most of the time you don't want the lyrics and the voice to get in the way of the song. And so writing a song lyric is related to writing poetry, but it's a different game.
Okay. When I was in 12th grade, high school, I remember we had to write some poetry, and most of my good friends in that class were just lost and couldn't do it. So, I guess it's okay. That was 1984, so I can tell you that I wrote them for a bunch of my friends, probably about 5 people. So I did my own assignment.
You all now flunk and lose your high school diploma.
Yeah, and I wrote theirs. Well, here was the thing. We had this teacher that, wasn't crazy about me. And she gave them better grade than she gave me. And I wrote them all. That's just something to think about. It's just a memory. I might have gotten a B and they got A's, right? And it was a little...
I'm surprised maybe she wasn't paying attention because...
Yeah.
I've had students present work done by other people or now by AI.
Did you know? Oh, right.
And most of the time, unless they're brand new, and the first thing you've ever seen written by them, they didn't write it.
Oh, you've got a point. But that this came up I can write in different styles though. And so I'm not formal. Well, I am formal. I have a music degree.
Yeah, but I'm talking about the voice. The
way you got you.
Words.
The words.
Yeah, whether you're writing a sonnet or a free verse or a song lyric, we tend to, if we've written enough, we tend to develop our own
style.
Voice. And
I can't remember what any of them were about.
And especially if they were not good students who didn't write well.
Well,
if they all of a sudden were writing a good poem, I would have thought she'd been suspicious. But oh well.
Maybe she was. Who knows? Yeah.
We will forgive her because it's ancient history.
It's just one of those things that you think about. It's so funny. Anyway, I love hearing all of this and learning more about how it just sort of found you, and now you're able to spend so much time in your sweet spot, something that really brings you joy and that matters to you.
Yeah, I just had my 5th full collection. My 9th book came out last fall.
Yeah. Well, before we wind down, I also want to ask you about another piece that binds us together is how you do continue to mentor and give back in that way, and how that's still something you make time for and do, particularly with our program, Leadership Fredericksburg, and just spend a minute more about talking about why that matters.
Well, first of all, it's giving back to Milton Foster and people like him, paying it forward. But one of my values has been that one of the first roles of any leader is to find, recruit, develop, and coach and teach other leaders.
I mean, that's exactly what you said in this, written down in my notebook.
Yeah, I
love it.
Personal mission statement and values, and probably need to revise it again. It's been a few years, but I don't remember. I stole that from a number of people smarter than me, but that leadership is a community role. It's not an individual role. Nobody is president of the United States, governor, president of an organization by themselves.
Yes.
Even when I had my music store, and my dad was my silent partner, but I was the one running it. It was all on me. I had people who became friends who worked for me part-time, who helped me to run the store.
Great.
That's even, when you have 5-6 employees, it's true. But certainly at Germanna, we're in the Poetry Society of Virginia on the board. Nobody does this by themselves. And so you want to mentor, develop leaders in your organization. Some people are threatened by doing that. If I give away the role in part to other people, doesn't that take away from me? And leadership is like love. The more you give it away, the more you have. Just like credit. You can't give credit away. I don't know how many times I have honestly said I didn't do this by myself and had people say, "Oh, you're so modest."
Right.
But it was true. So there's a self-interested reason to mentor. Another self-interested reason is that you keep learning about yourself and leadership by doing it.
Right.
And, having the opportunity to reflect like we're doing now helps you to keep relearning certain lessons. But it's also just a matter of giving to the world something important and helping other people to find their own success and find out who they are.
Nice. Yeah.
So, I'm gratified and humbled and very happy that you keep asking me to do this. I'm humbled and gratified that you have trusted me with that role with a wide diversity of people.
Yep.
I don't know how many times have you asked a man to mentor women, or a white man, straight white man to mentor someone who is gay or someone who is African American, or I even got to mentor someone who's older than me, John Brenning.
Yeah, I remember that was around 2012 or so.
And, of course, sometimes like with Aaron Dobbins, mentoring Aaron was like, we basically mentored each other.
Yeah.
I mean, he didn't need a lot of mentoring. And I really enjoyed our lunches together.
Yeah, he's fantastic. Pastor of Shiloh Old Site Baptist Church here in Fredericksburg. I'll tell you, it's great when we have the pool of mentors to choose from with each year, which is uniquely different on the class makeup. And when you ask that question, normally I do my best to match folks, male to male comfort levels.
Well, it's also seeing someone who looks like me, who is where I might want to be.
Exactly. But in the case of, we're fortunate, like this year, David, the class is 2/3 women. And so my pool, I had more men, than I had men to match them with. And in the case of a few of you that I call my seasoned leaders,
old folks.
Yeah, my seasoned, safe, approachable, okay to be in those roles, has had a leadership journey of such that there's a comfort there, no matter the person sitting across from them is comfortable sitting with them because you're at such a level of, as you put it, trust and capability that it's going to transcend a lot of those other pieces. So I know that there's comfort there with you and a few others. But this year, I did contact a gentleman who was mid 40s, and I asked him first because I needed to match some people. Mm-hmm. What's your comfort level if I matched you with a female? Da, da, da. And he went home and thought about it overnight. He chatted with his wife even and came back and said, I probably don't want to do that. I probably, if I can, I want to mentor, but I don't want to be put in a position where I make anyone uncomfortable because their ages were closer and it just, they're going to be alone together. There's just things that you have to think about.
Things into account.
Yeah. So anyway, in the end, they all work out most of the time. And so you're one of my treasures because I know, especially if I get a more seasoned leader too, I need to be able to put them with somebody that can listen at a certain level.
I mean, it's kind of connecting this to several things we talked about. Love in the organization and so on. Empathy is something that we all need to cultivate in ourselves. And, the first full-time job I had in higher education as assistant director at a college in the city of Detroit. Mm-hmm. That was a Catholic college. It's gone out of business, unfortunately. But the student body was mainly black, mainly female. Mm-hmm. And so I would walk down the hall, and I was the minority.
Yeah, sure.
And so here I am. I'm the adult and transfer coordinator or advisor and assistant director, trying to recruit black women, not just, but that was most of our students. Mm-hmm. And you could say, how's that going to work? And I realized that while we were different in many ways, mm-hmm. how we looked, mm-hmm. how we lived, where we lived, how we lived, whatever. Sure. There were some things that were very similar. Mm-hmm. We were both first generation college students. Mm. My grandparents were peasants from Poland and Syria. Theirs might have been peasants from the South.
You found that common ground.
And so there's always, even while I'm talking with and mentoring folks for Leadership Fredericksburg, it's often remarkable how there are always some things that ring in harmony in our life experience.
Nice. Well, thank you for that. And I'm just looking at the time here and definitely need to wind us down, my friend, for this episode. So as we close out, favorite motto you got? I know you've probably got 100. One you want to share today, or two?
One from the Tao Te Ching. It's a few thousand years old.
Okay.
When the work of the leader is done, the people say, "We did it ourselves." Another one from the Lakota. We are known by the tracks we leave behind.
Nice.
And the organizational consultant, Peter Senge. The only sustaining loyalty is loyalty to the truth. The only sustaining loyalty is loyalty to the truth, not to an individual, not even to an organization, although the truth of any organization should be in its mission and values. And so in terms of that organization, your loyalty should be to that above everything.
Interesting.
Which makes the job both easier and harder.
That gives us a lot to think about, David. Thank you. Anything else you'd like to share today?
No, to anybody that remembers me out there, hope you're doing well.
That's great. Well, gosh, it's been great to spend some time with you. Again, for our listeners, our guest today on the Leader to Leader podcast is Dr. David Sam. Here in our local community, he is the former president of Germanna Community College in Virginia and many other roles through the years. And today is a poet, freelance writer, adjunct professor, editor, and mentor. And I consider him a good friend. And I'm grateful to have this time with him today. Please, if you haven't already subscribed to the Chambers We Are Business podcast, go ahead and do so you'll know when we have other great leaders from our community here to share information with you. Thank you. See you next time.